Andrew Demeter is a 16-year-old teenager who recently confronted House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi over her support of domestic spying. The young man won a chance to interview lawmakers. Although his initial meeting was canceled, Demeter had his opportunity to speak to the 74-year-old Democrat from California. He took full advantage of his chance, asking the lawmaker pointed questions about government powers and surveillance. Let's take a look.
Why do you support the NSA's illegal and ubiquitous data collection?
Well, I have questions about the metadata collection that they were collecting, unless they had a reason to do so. So I didn't support Amash, that resolution. I didn't think that was the appropriate resolution. But I do think that the burden is on the department, and I have fought them for years, on the community, fought them for years on the wide swath that they have put out there.
You did vote for a bill to continue funding for the NSA, though.
Yeah, of course. I don't think we should not fund the National Security Agency. No, they do many things.
Isn't the NSA a clear violation of the Fourth Amendment?
No. Some of what they do should be subjected to scrutiny in some of the things, but they perform many other functions as well, and we hold them to a high order. And I've had my biggest fights here in the intelligence community with the director of the NSA, Hayden. When he was the director, I don't think he was on the level with us. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other things that are there that are good things that are necessary for us to have. But from 9/11 on, the Bush administration went too far on all of these things, and we have the correspondence back and forth to prove or to demonstrate that they were just doing the wrong thing.
The young man minced no words, but was still polite and cordial to the representative. Afterwards, he was invited to speak on several television networks. He's our guest on the show today. He's here to talk to us about his encounter with Pelosi, as well as spying programs. We'll talk about how he came to speak with the House California representative, as well as his plans for the future. Welcome back to the program, Andrew.
Thanks for having me on the program, Gary.
Andrew, we just watched your video again. We played it last week on the program when it broke. What was your first impression of Pelosi when you met?
You know, I thought it was just typical of a politician, really. I mean, originally when the whole student cam group and I arrived in Pelosi's office, you know, she was very welcoming. It kind of seemed superficial in some sense, but I do have to give her props for taking the time out of her day to meet with us and everything. But once I heard her response, you know, it just seemed typical of a politician. They kind of just diffused the responsibility onto another individual, specifically in this case Bush,
who
Andrew,
hasn't even. She deflected all of the NSA spy programs onto Bush. Do you think that was fair?
No, I really don't, because I'm not even a Republican. I don't support Bush nor Pelosi. I'm a libertarian, self-described. But you know, I just think it's ridiculous that Bush really initiated the Patriot Act, which was essentially the precursor to the current NSA programs of dragnet surveillance. And now and Pelosi in the video, she said she disagreed with what Bush did, but now under Obama, since he's a Democrat, just like Pelosi, now she magically agrees with the programs, even though they've just been enhanced. So it's just ridiculous.
Now, what was your impression of the security at the Capitol?
It wasn't too surprising, really. I mean, I think the TSA security at the airport when I flew into DC was more enhanced, I guess, for lack of a better word, or more secure. But I said in the press release, and I think it really holds true, the fact is, you know, when you're going into the Capitol, you're kind of preemptively perceived as a terrorist, or a criminal at least. And then when you go in there, you know, that's how you're perceived. But then the true people conspiring against the American public are these politicians. And, you know, they think they're above the law, and understandably so, with some of the things that I witnessed when I was in DC. Even just getting breakfast in the morning, you couldn't even pour your own glass of water. So that's how these politicians are pampered, really, and I think it just shows that they don't think they're competent, and they don't think they have to abide by their own laws, which is ironic because they vote for these laws, they vote for this legislation, and in some cases even write up the legislation. But then when I just ask a simple question, why did you vote for this, they can't even answer to a group of teenagers.
Now, were you surprised by any of her responses to your questions, or were you anticipating it?
I thought she could have answered them a bit more coherently, with all due respect. I don't consider myself to be the most articulate of individuals, but I do think that, she really didn't answer it much. And instead of kind of positively answering my question, she negatively answered it in the sense that I asked her, why does she support it? And in essence, she said, I don't support this other bill that Amash voted for or introduced to be voted for to defund the NSA. So instead of before she even deflected the responsibility to Bush, I just asked her, why did she vote for it? And she said, well, I didn't vote for this other bill. So I found that pretty funny as well.
Now, your video has gone completely viral across the web. How many views does it have right now?
Last time I checked, it was about 525,000.
It's pretty impressive. Now, what has been the response? I know you've been doing the media circuit, and we've had you on this program long before Fox News was interested in you. So you went on Fox Business. Tell us a little bit about your media experience that you've had since the release.
Yeah, it's been crazy, really. Just within the first 24 hours that I posted the video, The Blaze picked it up, InfoWars, Story Leak, the Washington Times, The Blaze, Glenn Beck's affiliate, Drudge Report even had it on their front page. So it's really been crazy, and I was actually, I wasn't surprised that Fox wanted to have me on. I was actually invited on Fox and Friends in the morning, and also Neil Cavuto's show, and I ended up going on Cavuto because I figured Fox and Friends is kind of a more fluffy show that nobody's really going to care about it, even though it did have more viewers. But it does really tell a lot, because Fox was really the only mainstream media outlet to pick it up, and I think that's mainly because they're conservative, and whether or not they really agree with what I'm doing, they just kind of wanted to use me as a conduit to put their own agenda out there and use me kind of just to bash liberalism and all what Pelosi stands for. So it's not that I'm against Fox, but I find it funny how they pick up something to just kind of further their agenda, and no other mainstream media outlets really picked it up, not MSNBC or CNN, because they're pretty much liberal.
None of the other mainstream outlets picked it up?
Correct.
Never even contacted you?
No.
And why do you believe that to be true?
Well, really just what I just said, because it doesn't suit their agenda. And there was a video a while ago, too. Before I posted this video, I was kind of just searching it to see if there was any other teenagers that had confronted some big politicians. And I did find this one group of teenagers talking about illegal immigration and how their parents had illegally immigrated into the United States. So they were talking with John Boehner about why he voted for some bill or something like that at a diner. And I saw that was featured on like ABC, MSNBC, and some other liberal outlets, and they weren't featured on Fox. So it's funny how they just kind of try to bash, the networks try to bash the opposite thing that that didn't really make much sense, but they just really pick the news to suit their agenda.
Andrew, how did you get access to Nancy Pelosi? I understand you won a contest.
Right, and I don't think I'll ever get that same degree of access in the future, and understandably so. But last time you had me on actually was right before this took place, because you had me on about the documentary that I had created, We the People Genetically Modified. And I entered that into C-SPAN's annual and national student cam documentary competition for middle school and high school students. And I won first prize in that competition. It was called first prize, but technically there was a grand prize, and then there was 3 other first prize winners. And so the grand prize winner and myself and the other 3 first prize winners were flown into Washington, D.C., complimentary of C-SPAN, because we had like a 3-day agenda there. First day, we kind of just toured around D.C., and then the next day, we had a roundtable discussion that was filmed at C-SPAN that's also available online should anybody be interested. And then the last day, we got to, meet with Pelosi, and the reason for meeting her really wasn't anything particularly pertaining to her. Originally, we were supposed to meet with John Boehner and Harry Reid, but that eventually fell through, and Pelosi was kind of the only last willing politician to meet with us. So I do have to give her credit for that. But we kind of just met with her. She went around, asked who we were, what our documentaries were about, and then asked if we had any questions for her about them. And
she asked you about your documentary, We the People Genetically Modified. What was her response to the GMO question? We didn't see that in the video.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I didn't ask her a question about GMOs because we were supposed to ask her a question, like I said, about the documentaries that we had created.
Also, you were allowed to ask her, each person there was allowed to ask her one question about the documentary that had been produced. Is that correct?
Correct, about the documentary that you had produced, and then you could ask a question about that. So the contestant, one of the winners, Peter, who had gone before me, I was the last person there to ask a question. Peter did a documentary about the NSA. So I didn't ask a question about GMOs, and I kind of just tailed off of what he said. I said, or Pelosi said, you know, your documentary was on GMOs. Do you have a question for me about it? And I said, well, mine was on GMOs, but I have a question related to his, referring to Peter's documentary on the NSA. And then I just shot her my question. And it is kind of funny. Maybe I'll give you the exclusive footage or put it on YouTube of the whole meeting we had, because it was about a 15-minute video. And before, all the other people who asked the questions, Pelosi answered them fairly articulately. And then when she arrived at mine, you could see she was kind of superficially smiling until I shot the question. And then she kind of got the deer in the headlights look. Her legislative assistant in the corner was smiling. Then she had this perplexed look on her face. Then she started texting on her phone. And I'm still kind of confused about that. Maybe she was writing my name down or something. Who knows? So that's essentially how I got in and why I asked her the question I did.
So after you asked such a pointed question, Nancy Pelosi sort of recoils, deer in headlights look. We saw that on the video. Clearly, what did the other students say as you were leaving the room? Because you could, as you're watching it, you can see their faces, you can see their reactions, and some are sort of shaking their head and nodding with Nancy's response. But when you guys all left, what was the conversation, say, in the van on the way out?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's kind of a little unsettling. There really wasn't much of a conversation. The only student that specifically commented on it to me was Donald. He was closest to Pelosi in the back row. He was on the far right, I believe. And he right after it, he just kind of said, you know, that was awesome, man. So that was a positive response. Shelley, who was kind of nodding on the left-hand side in the first row, she didn't really make much comment, but evidently in the video she was kind of nodding. And a lot of people made some very interesting comments about her. But in her defense, in Shelley's defense, it was a very long day, and if I hadn't asked that question, I probably would have been doing the same thing. So I don't think she was making any political statement necessarily by just nodding her head. And then Peter, in the middle of the back row, he was the most animated of anyone there. He had some interesting looks on his face. He kind of seemed like he was trying to hold in some laughter at some points. And then he kind of looked like he was trying to turn his head and avoid the awkwardness that ensued. And then Emma, the blonde-haired girl in the first row, right after that, like I said, everyone was tired, so I doubt it was anything related. But right after we were about to leave, she felt really lightheaded and she had to sit down. She wasn't feeling well. So whether that's related or not, I have no idea. But those were some of the responses. And then C-SPAN had a very interesting response. And I've said this in past interviews, I don't think C-SPAN's up to anything nefarious. But one of C-SPAN's employees, who I'm not going to name because, like I said, I don't think he's up to any shady business. But right after that, he said, you know, I saw you holding up your phone when you asked Pelosi the question. And curiously enough, he said, were you planning on posting that to YouTube? And I said at the time, you know, why does it matter to you? Why do you care? And he said, and I can't quote it directly, but I'll paraphrase. He essentially said, well, we wouldn't want to damage C-SPAN's relationship with Pelosi's office. Now, I don't think by that he meant anything that they have any political ties, hopefully, and it's probably just for special access like what we had on that day meeting Pelosi, but I found that very interesting.
Well, Andrew, simply holding a camera phone, asking a politician an important question about privacy, and I mean, the National Security Agency's revelations through Snowden have been have been devastating across the face of America and across the face of liberty. So C-SPAN is concerned more about their relationship with Pelosi and a simple question of a legislator regarding that topic?
Well, that's what it seems like. So yeah, the employee from C-SPAN, he asked me if I was going to post it to YouTube. And like I said, you know, why does it matter to you? Because at the time too, when I was recording the video, this was one of the main problems I encountered with the whole confrontation, because I had my cell phone up and I was recording. And then once I was done, it was about an 8-minute video. And then I pressed stop record. And then when I had lunch later that day at Union Station, I went to review the footage and only 4 minutes was there. The other 4 minutes of the 8-minute video wasn't there. So at that point, I pretty much freaked out. I took to Facebook on my fan page kind of saying, how do you recover a video from your phone? And the case ended up being that my phone ran out of memory mid-recording. And this is a problem I've had in the past, so it's not some targeted conspiracy or anything. So eventually then when I got home back to Cleveland, I emailed C-SPAN asking them if I could have the footage, and I actually emailed a different person then who had confronted me about posting the video on YouTube. And then the next day I got an email back from not the person I had emailed, but the individual from C-SPAN who had confronted me kind of about posting it to YouTube. And he essentially said, in response to me asking if I could get the footage, he said, well, we had an agreement with Pelosi's office that we couldn't record audio during the meeting, which I found really funny because, and you can see it in the extended video that's not on YouTube, the cameraman from C-SPAN had a microphone, an external microphone that he was holding out to pick up audio. So I said, that's ridiculous. The fact that there's this imaginary agreement between Pelosi's office and C-SPAN that nobody there ever knew of, and then you're saying you can't record audio, yet at the same time the cameraman's holding out a microphone. That makes absolutely no sense. So eventually I won C-SPAN over, saying basically on the premise that, you know, the whole point of this contest, this student cam competition that we entered, was to, like C-SPAN always touts that they do, is to be objective, be unbiased, get both sides of the story, and not to censor a particular side of the story that's contrary to the agenda that's trying to be employed. So eventually I got the footage back, and C-SPAN's founder, Brian Lamb, when I was still in DC, when my father and I went back to C-SPAN's office, he even said, kind of, I can't quote him again, but I remember him saying something to the effect of like, you know, good job, that's what real journalism is. And he was essentially applauding me, despite the fact that one of his employees was trying to essentially, you know, intimidate me from not posting this on YouTube.
Andrew, what do your parents say about this? First of all, you winning this contest, and then going to Washington, confronting Pelosi on such a controversial topic, and then now making the rounds nationally on the media. What do your parents say about this?
Well, my parents, they're both proud of that I won the competition for my documentary, and that was a great deal of fun going to DC and going around and everything, and being on C-SPAN. But as far as the video, my dad seems to be primarily supportive, and my mom, on the other hand, well, she's kind of becoming a bit more supportive. At first, when I showed her the video, and I showed my grandmother too before I posted it on YouTube, my mom and grandmother said respectively, I hope you live until you're 18 and you should think twice before posting this. So I think that's really representative of how far down the tubes our country has gone, if just by simply asking a question, fulfilling the obligation that the mainstream media fails to do, I think it's representative that, you know, you ask a question in this country and suddenly you're seen as the bad person. It's seen that, you know, these black helicopters are going to be circling over your house, or you're going to be targeted by the IRS or sent off to Guantanamo Bay. I think it's ridiculous that you just ask a question and that's what happens. That's what people's knee-jerk reaction is. I mean, that's reminiscent of communist China.
Andrew, if you could ask Nancy Pelosi one more question, what would it be?
I would ask her to clarify, because in the video she fails to make any coherent sense, and maybe I'd even ask her to explain what she meant without diffusing the responsibility to the Bush administration, because like I mentioned earlier in this interview, that was 6 years ago. Bush initiated the NSA essentially with the Patriot Act, with warrantless wiretapping and dragnet surveillance. But the NSA with the Obama administration has just furthered this surveillance, this Orwellian surveillance of Americans. So I guess that's one question or two questions that I'd ask her. But I don't think I'm going to be getting close to her anytime soon with what I've done thus far. Even though I have no malcontent, I'm just asking a question and being nonviolent. I think that if I got anywhere remotely close to her, security would be on me all over the place.